All right. Thanking God and praising him this time for patience, understanding that there is an old, somewhat famous saying that goes, be careful praying for patience because God might give you the adversity that produces patience as opposed to just hitting an easy button and making you patient. Understanding that's similar to another saying, be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. However, as much as I was reluctant to go into the topic of patience, it seems to be the thing that comes to my mind most when I'm thinking of Habakkuk, the book that we are in now, understanding that it starts out pretty early on with a question from Habakkuk, the prophet, to God, how long? A question that seems to carry forward into all three chapters of this prophecy. And because this is a chapter, or this is a book of the Bible that has a number of famous passages, I'm going to use that as an excuse to shorten my summaries and focus on themes. But that creates this problem. There are a lot of themes, and that provides an opportunity for a lot of confusion. So we're just going to see how this goes with shortened summaries, focused on themes, and hopefully it'll be productive in some way. Either way, let's call Habakkuk chapter 1, how long? Because in verse 1, it is going to begin the oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. That's one of those passages that just needs to be read, in my humble opinion. From there, let's just roughly summarize the structure, a relatively famous structure in at least chapter 1, where you get Habakkuk's complaint. It's going to be followed with God's answer. Don't worry, I'm doing something. You probably won't believe it. But he's raising up the Chaldeans, which is going to provoke Habakkuk in the last section of this first chapter, verses 12 through 17, to be like them. Understanding he's going to have a problem with God using an unrighteous people to basically discipline his fellow countrymen in Judah, who he seems to be describing as unrighteous people. But there's a wisdom in that. And the reason why Habakkuk strikes me is it reminds me of that time before I got used to seeing God work in this way. It seemed really strange for, as Habakkuk says, God to use unrighteous people to rebuke people more righteous than they are. However, Habakkuk misses the point, as I think we all can from time to time. When we choose the path of unrighteousness, we don't get to set boundaries on how God repays us according to our wrongs. With that, let's go ahead and look at some of those themes, beginning with the theme of injustice that he sees in his people. Like I said, I think at this point, it's the people of Judah, with Israel quite possibly having already been taken into Assyrian captivity. Verse 4, once again, comments on the way that the law is paralyzed and justice never goes forth, as the wicked surround the righteous and justice is perverted. Him identifying that in the people of Judah is going to provoke the response from God in verse 7, where he says, the Chaldeans, those he's bringing to deal with Judah, are characterized by the fact that they are dreaded and fearsome, and their justice and dignity go forth from themselves. They make stuff up as they go along. Whatever they can come up with is what they impose, or the law they impose, at least on others. Going on, though, Habakkuk is going to make it clear that he has a problem with God using the Chaldeans for judgment on his people in verse 12, where he says, you have ordained them as judgment, and you, O rock, have established them for reproof. Going back to verse 7, we might see that other theme that helps us understand why he has a problem with them. When, as we mentioned before, it's the fact that their dignity goes forth from themselves, something that picks up again in verse 11, where it says they sweep by like the wind and go on. Guilty men whose own might is their God, something again we'll see in Habakkuk's rebuttal or response to God in verse 16, where it says, therefore he sacrifices to his net and makes offering to his dragnet, for by them he lives in luxury and his food is rich. His dragnet, not talking about fish, but He's talking about the way in which God, like fish, has basically made the peoples of the earth. And so the Chaldeans aren't hunting fish, they're hunting people. Verse 14, making that clear, where it says, you make mankind like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler. He, seeming to refer back to the Chaldean, brings all of them up with a hook. He drags them out with his net. He gathers them in his dragnet. So he rejoices and is glad. Thus, verse 16, where he is sacrificing to his net. Once again, making it clear that the tie, I can't say it makes it clear. To me, it seems like it's clear that the tie that binds all of their morality is basically winning. Their ability to conquer other nations makes them prey to their nets, the things that allow them to conquer. Their whole idea of right and wrong, back in verse 7, goes forth from whatever they can make up, presumably whatever they think that can produce a win. And then, as we saw in verse 11, their God is nothing more than their power. And so as Habakkuk settles in at the end of the chapter to wait to see how long it will take God to produce a response, he is basically getting the introduction to the way in which there are times when God stops trying to reason with those who prioritize power over reason, as he will then simply begin to raise up a bully to bully the bullies. A familiar phrase that still seems to leave Habakkuk with the question, what happens to the new bully? A question God will answer in Habakkuk chapter 2.